During an invasion of Shell City, one of the officers from the 153rd Marine Corps base is eliminated by Miss Valentine, who works for a criminal organization called Baroque Works. When he realizes that the perimeter has been breached, Commander Ripper and his men prepare to defend the base, blocking the doors while drawing their weapons to fight. However, when the doors open, the sailors are faced with a woman and hesitate to pull the trigger. At that moment, Nico Robin takes advantage of the opening to put her powers into action and manages to defeat her enemies from a distance, causing several arms to sprout from their bodies. As she walks down the hallway, Robin sees her arms cause the destruction of the soldiers around her, and then the limbs disappear, resulting in a shower of pink petals. After approaching Ripper, the pirate forces one of the sailors to point the gun at his commander, and then one of Robin's arms pulls the trigger. When the invasion is complete, the team discovers that Mr. Seven has been eliminated in a duel with Zoro, and they all come to the cold conclusion that they will need to find someone to replace him. However, before that, they decide to go after the swordsman to once again try to recruit him to their organization. Meanwhile, Nami is evaluating the maps to find the best route to the Grand Line, but Sanji convinces her to stop and stock up on supplies before continuing the journey. After voting, the Straw Hats decide to go to Logatown, even though they know it is home to the largest marine headquarters, because it is the best city in the region for shopping. When he discovers that Logatown is where Gold Roger was eliminated, and where the legend of One Piece began, Luffy becomes even more excited for the trip, unlike Usopp, who thinks it's a terrible idea to go meet the guys who want to arrest them. After the gang splits up to go shopping, Usopp takes the opportunity to call Kaya, while Zoro goes after a new sword. Upon entering Mr. Matsu's shop, the swordsman meets Tashigi and asks the young woman for help in choosing a sword. While searching through all the swords in the store, Zoro comes across Sandai Kitetsu, known to be the third in the line of great cursed swords. According to Tashigi, even renowned swordsmen have met tragic ends when wielding it, which piques Zoro's interest even more. When he realizes that Matsu is unwilling to sell that sword because he believes it poses a danger to its user, Zoro decides to make a bet and stretches out his arm after throwing the sword upward, seeing the blade pass straight through the young man's body without causing a single scratch. Matsu not only sells the cursed sword to Zoro but also gives him Yubashiri, a valuable heirloom of his family, as a gift. While crossing the city in search of the platform where Gold Roger was eliminated, Luffy ends up meeting Buggy again, an old enemy who almost caused the destruction of his entire gang. When he discovers that the clown has teamed up with Alvida to try to capture him and collect the bounty on his head, Luffy uses his rubber arm to try to strike them, but discovers that the woman is the new bearer of the Sub Sub no Mi. After devouring the devil fruit, Alvida acquired an extremely slippery body, so that anything thrown at her cannot hit her. At that moment, the woman uses her slippery trail to strike Luffy, who ends up fainting from the attack. When he wakes up, the young pirate is wearing Kairoseki handcuffs, an element that carries all the properties of the sea and consequently nullifies the powers of those who have eaten the devil fruit. Meanwhile, all the other members of the gang gather, and when they realize that their captain has disappeared, they go out to look for him. When Luffy is about to be eliminated, Sanji and his friends show up to rescue him, and they must defeat Alvida's crew before saving their captain. The problem is that, in addition to being more powerful than ever, Alvida has managed to gather a legion of loyal pirates, and they all want the Straw Hat's head. After taking Luffy to the platform, Buggy draws his weapon to remove the head of the boy who dreams of being the Pirate King. When he realizes that his friends will not be able to save him in time, Luffy apologizes for having to abandon them so soon and begins to laugh at his impending demise. However, even before the blade reaches his neck, Luffy sees a strong lightning bolt come down from the sky and hit Buggy's body. Immediately, the platform is destroyed, but Luffy manages to survive and runs back to the ship with his friends. However, halfway there, the team encounters Tashigi, and Zoro orders his friends to return to the ship while he takes care of things there. At that moment, the swordsman discovers that the young woman who helped him choose his sword actually works for the Navy, and Tashigi reveals that she was disappointed to find out that Zoro is a member of a pirate crew. When challenged to a duel, Zoro has no choice but to draw one of his swords to fight, and within minutes, Tashigi is defeated, allowing Zoro to join his friends. Meanwhile, Sanji and Luffy team up to fight Captain Smoker, who, despite being a Navy officer, also ate a devil fruit to gain superpowers. When he realizes that he will not be able to land a blow on his opponent, since his body is made of smoke, Luffy tries to think of a new plan to defeat him. However, in the meantime, he ends up being captured and is about to be eliminated by Smoker when a mysterious man appears and prevents the officer from hurting the young man. Upon arriving at the ship, Sanji asks the captain who the man who saved him was, but Luffy says he has never seen that guy before. Hours later, at dawn, the group arrives at Reverse Mountain, the entrance to the Grand Line, and Luffy celebrates joyfully, knowing that this is one step closer to realizing his big dream. The problem is that to cross it, the crew will have to pass through a small corridor, where the wreckage of hundreds of ships lies. Following Nami's instructions, Usopp manages to keep the ship under control, but he has to use all his strength to fight the current. When they realize their friend is in trouble, Sanji and Zoro join forces to help him, but end up using too much force and accidentally break the ship's rudder. At that moment, Nami orders her friends to adjust the sails and turn to starboard, while Luffy uses his elastic arms to hold onto the rocks and pull the ship up. Upon reaching the top of the mountain, Nami and Luffy see the Grand Line right in front of them and celebrate, but soon realize that they need to figure out how to get the boat down. During the descent, the gang encounters a whale waiting for them with its mouth open, and the entire ship ends up being swallowed. Thanks to his powers, Luffy manages to escape and tries everything he can to get the animal to return his friends. Suddenly, the boy sees an old man throw a tranquilizer dart at the whale and asks for help to get his friends out of it, but Crocus says they are already lifeless. After introducing himself, the lighthouse keeper informs him that the whale has been trying to cross the Red Line for years, which is completely impossible. Meanwhile, Nami and the rest of the crew are in the whale's stomach trying to figure out a way to repair their ship, Mary, and get out of there. During the search for the missing part, Sanji and Usopp are surprised by the sudden appearance of Mr. Nine, who attacks them to steal their ship. However, during the battle, in an attempt to reach his enemies, the madman ends up suffering an accident and passes out. Meanwhile, on the ship, Nami is surprised by the arrival of Miss Wednesday and ends up being defeated by the woman, who tries to convince her to leave the ship. However, Sanji and Usopp arrive just in time, and Wednesday is forced to retreat when she discovers that her partner has been captured. When he realizes that Luffy has no intention of giving up on rescuing his friends, Crocus decides to help him and says that there is only one way to safely approach the whale lagoon. According to the old man, that whale was a member of the crew of Yorkie, the captain of the Rumbar pirates. After separating from his group, the whale swam alone in the open sea and began to follow the pirates in West Blue. When they realized how much the animal loved music, the Rumbar pirates became attached to it, and since then, Laboon has become an official member of the crew. However, Yorkie knew that the whale would never be able to survive in the waters of the Grand Line, where all kinds of sea monsters live. So, the pirate asked Crocus for help in keeping Laboon safe until his crew finished their journey, so they could come back for him. However, years passed and Laboon's crew never returned. The poor thing thinks his friends are sailing on the other side of that wall, and believes that if he can get through it, he can reach them. But at that moment, Usopp provokes Valentine into attacking him, and her powerful punches end up destroying the wax statues that held the Straw Hats captive. When he reaches Brogy's cave, Luffy comes across the statue built around Dory's body and becomes even more furious. Then, when Mr. 3 uses a wax handcuff to imprison him, the pirate uses that weapon to his advantage and swings his rubber arm to hit his enemy, using the handcuff as if it were a hammer. After winning the duel, Luffy frees Dory and goes to meet his friends. When the team is about to leave the island, the two giants appear to say goodbye. Despite wounding his opponent, Dory wasn't using a sword sharp enough to eliminate him, so Brogy survived and they both decided to let go of their senseless enmity. As soon as the crew begins their journey, a giant sea monster emerges from the water and they are paralyzed, not knowing what to do. However, Brogy and Dory promptly join forces to help them and use their weapons to produce a beam of water so strong that it is capable of cutting the monster in half. Everything seemed to be going well, until on the way to Alabasta, Nami starts feeling unwell and her body begins to show signs of infection. Therefore, her team decides to stop at the first island they find along the way to get medical help, and end up stopping in the Drum Kingdom. Upon arriving at the island, the Straw Hat Pirates are greeted by Dalton, the captain of the Civil Guard, who reveals to the strangers that his island was nearly decimated by Blackbeard's gang. According to him, the only doctor available on that island is Kureha, a witch who lives in a castle on top of a snowy mountain. When they realize that Nami won't survive until dawn, Sanji and Luffy decide to get her to the witch's castle as soon as possible. After tying Nami to his body, Luffy begins to climb the mountain, but ends up slipping halfway up. Luckily, he manages to grab onto the rock in time, but Sanji also slips soon after. During the fall, the cook asks Luffy to continue the mission, but the captain refuses to leave a member of his crew behind and sends his head to retrieve him. Thanks to his elastic neck, Luffy is able to reach Sanji and throw him directly to the top of the mountain. Minutes later, the young pirate also arrives at his final destination, and collapses from exhaustion just before reaching the castle. Hours later, when she wakes up, Nami finds a small reindeer wearing a hat, and discovers that the little animal is Kureha's assistant, the doctor who took care of her. Upon meeting Chopper, Luffy and Sanji are intrigued by this small, shy, and frightened creature who, despite his fragile appearance, harbors a courageous heart. Later, during dinner, Luffy asks Chopper why he doesn't want to join him, and Kureha reveals that the reindeer harbors a lot of resentment towards humans. According to her, Chopper grew up alone, without friends or family. All he had was the worst doctor on the island, who meant everything to him. During the hunt for doctors, Wapol, the tyrannical king who ruled that island, hunted down all the doctors in the Drum Kingdom and kept them imprisoned in the castle. Those who resisted were eliminated immediately, and in a short time, only 2 doctors remained alive, Kureha and Dr. Hirulik, responsible for producing the most sinister medicines imaginable. One night, while fleeing from the king's guards, Hiralik finds a small, gravely wounded creature, and gradually manages to gain its trust. Due to blood loss, Chopper faints and wakes up at the doctor's house, who helps him take care of his wounds. According to the animal, the other reindeer rejected him because of his blue snout, and humans hunted him when they discovered he could talk. So, after asking a few questions, Hiralik discovers that Chopper ate a devil fruit and gained new abilities. Since then, Chopper and Hiralik have been inseparable, and the doctor has been teaching his new apprentice everything he knows. However, the doctor was very ill, and after several years searching for a cure for his illness, he knew he didn't have much time left to live. Therefore, after saying goodbye to Chopper, Hiralik invades the castle with his pockets full of explosives, and gives his life to save his companions who were captured by the king. Before dying, the doctor asks Dalton not to let the guards hurt Chopper, as he knows he will appear at any moment. Seeing the reindeer approaching, the guard positions himself in front of the gates to prevent it from entering the castle. Then Chopper grows in size to climb over him. However, during the duel, Dalton advises the creature not to sacrifice its life in vain, and convinces it to leave in order to honor Hiralik's sacrifice. From that day forward, Chopper went to live with Dr. Kureha, who promised to help the reindeer become a real doctor. Meanwhile, while on watch at the city gates, Dalton sees a plume of smoke forming in the forest and decides to go investigate. At that moment, he is struck by arrows from King Waipal's servants and taken before him. When Dalton discovers that the king intends to return to the throne after abandoning his people during Blackbeard's invasion, he asserts that the inhabitants of that kingdom will never accept a tyrant like him back in power. When challenged, Waipal decides to reveal his secret, and shows the powers he acquired after devouring a devil fruit. At that moment, Dalton transforms into a beast and attacks his king, but ends up being stabbed and discovers that Waipal devoured his own army to create even more dangerous soldiers. While Zoro and Usopp try to keep the village safe, Vivi climbs the mountains to warn Luffy and the others about what's coming. But before they have a chance to descend the mountain, Waipal appears at the castle. Meanwhile, back in the village, the residents join Zoro and Usopp to confront the royal army, only to discover that all the soldiers have been transformed into true monsters. Upon discovering that the place has been invaded, Chopper rushes to help Sanji get Nami out of there safely, and assumes his muscular form to defend his patient from the king's henchmen. After getting rid of those men, the reindeer and the cook go to meet Luffy, and Sanji helps him throw the king out of the castle. When Waipal is defeated, all of his guards revert to their original forms and decide to surrender, knowing that this is the only way to have their lives spared. After freeing the doctors and tending to Dalton's injuries, Kureha takes Zoro and Usopp to the castle, and Chopper has the chance to meet the other members of the crew. At that moment, Luffy invites the reindeer to join his crew, and Chopper accepts the invitation, but before leaving he says goodbye to Dr. Kureha and takes a sled to take his new friends to the beach. That night, they throw a welcome party for Chopper on the ship, and for the first time in a long time, the little guy feels like he truly belongs somewhere. The next stop, finally, is the kingdom of Alabasta, and Luffy promises to help Vivi's people rid themselves of the threats of Baroque works. Hearing this, the young woman is relieved to know she has friends to count on in that battle, and reveals that Mr. Zero, who commands the entire organization, is actually Sir Crocodile, one of the most wanted pirates on the Grand Line. Truth is that the Red Line is impenetrable, and if he continues like this, Laboon will hit his head on the rocks until he loses his life. Day after day, Crocus does his best to prevent the whale from hurting itself, but as soon as the sedative wears off, he starts banging her head on the rocks again. When he hears the sound of the animal trying to cross the wall, Luffy risks his life to go to him and begins to sing the famous song of the Rumbar Pirates. Upon hearing that song, Laboon returns to the surface and cries, as the song reminds him of the friends he has lost. At that moment, Luffy asks the whale to free his companions, so the animal opens its mouth so they can leave. Before continuing his journey, Luffy draws a skull on Laboon's head and declares that it now belongs to his crew. So, the whale can't keep banging its head against the wall, because if it does, the symbol will disappear. Finally, Luffy promises that as soon as his mission is complete, he will return for Laboon, and they can travel together. After saying this, the Straw Hats continue their journey to the next island, taking their 2 new prisoners with them. However, thanks to Luffy's naivety, who thought it was a good idea to free Miss Wednesday, both managed to escape before the crew could even reach Cactus Island. To their surprise, after docking on the island, Luffy and his crew are extremely well received by the residents and even by the mayor, who welcomes them in an almost suspicious manner. Normally, people don't like pirates, but they're in Whiskey Peak. Igram says that sea travelers are very welcome. When the bell rings, the man invites the strangers to dinner and the crew is welcomed with a big party. Throughout the night, Usopp tells those people about the adventures he has had with his friends in recent days and takes the opportunity to promote himself as a great hero. After winning money from a nun in a drinking contest, Nami plans to climb to the top of the cacti to get a better view of the island and include it on her maps. However, the drunk nun advises her not to go there, and Nami realizes that they are hiding something and becomes even more excited to investigate. At that moment, Sanji and Usopp are lured into a private party with 2 beautiful women, while Luffy indulges in the banquet offered by Igaram. During the meal, the mayor approaches the pirate and says he is impressed with the bounty the Navy is offering for his head. After advising Luffy not to trust people so easily, the man reveals that he is part of the same organization that Miss Wednesday works for and reveals that his codename is Mr. 8. With the help of his saxophone, the criminal manages to hypnotize the young pirate and put him to sleep. While investigating the island's surroundings, Nami discovers the secret that the residents are trying hard to hide. The truth is that everyone in that town hates pirates and only pretends to be welcoming in order to catch them off guard. After hearing the man's confession, Nami knocks him out with her baton and runs to alert her friends. When he leaves the bar, Zoro is followed by 2 other men and soon realizes that they are trying to corner him, but even drunk, the swordsman easily takes down his enemies. After finding her friend, Nami asks Zoro to find Sanji and Usopp while she goes after Luffy. When he enters the bar and sees dozens of opponents coming his way, Zoro is happy to finally be able to test his new swords, and even though he is hit by surprise attacks, the swordsman gets up to continue the battle. After staining his blade with the blood of dozens of enemies, Zoro encounters a nun who pretends to be harmless in order to catch him off guard with pepper spray. After being hit by a small blade, Zoro moves away and listens carefully to the woman's footsteps so he can hit her, even without being able to open his eyes. In a few seconds, Zoro regains his vision and continues using his swords to eliminate the other opponents who decide to try their luck by trying to hit him. When he wakes up from hypnosis, Luffy discovers that Wednesday and 8 are planning to steal his ship to leave the island, so he decides to try to stop them. After reaching the vehicle, the Straw Hat uses his powers to knock them down, and then Nami appears. According to her, the entire city works for Baroque Works, so everyone there is his enemy. Suddenly, Miss Valentine and Mr. 5 appear and reveal that they were sent by Mr. 0 to capture the 2 traitors. After helping Wednesday and Igaram escape, Nami orders them to explain themselves, and the young woman reveals that they both infiltrated Baroque Works to try to take them down. The problem is that they were unable to gather enough information to bring down the organization, and Igaram ended up being seriously injured during the escape. After introducing himself as captain of the Alabasta Royal Guard, Igaram begs Luffy to take Princess Vivi home safely, as the future of their country depends on it. Even without knowing exactly who Miss Wednesday, whose real name is Vivi, Luffy gives his word that he will escort her back home, so Igaram uses the weapons hidden in his wig to machine gun their enemies while the pirates take Vivi to the ship. According to the princess, Baroque Works has been sowing discord between her father, the king, and the citizens of Alabasta, and because of this, her country is on the brink of civil war. With Igaram's help, Vivi discovered the true identity of Mr. 0, the leader of that criminal organization, and that information may be enough to save her country. However, when she discovers that Robin has boarded the ship, Vivi realizes that returning to her kingdom will be even more difficult than she could have imagined. After using her powers to neutralize any attack from Luffy and his crew, the woman tries to negotiate a place in the crew in exchange for eternal pose, which will show them the way to a deserted island. This way, the crew will avoid problems when docking at 2 other islands they will encounter along the way and cross the Grand Line at a faster speed. However, instead of accepting the deal, Luffy destroys the device and Robin leaves after warning about the target that the entire team has put on their backs by accepting Vivi on board. Hours later, the Straw Hats arrive at Little Garden and decide to leave the ship to explore the island. After walking around for a while, they discover that they are on a prehistoric island that is home to dinosaurs and scary monsters. While trying to convince Usopp to muster up the courage to go out and explore, Nami is surprised by the arrival of a giant who, after drinking all the beer on the ship, decides to take her for lunch. A few miles away, Sanji and Zoro encounter a T-Rex, but the swordsman manages to neutralize it with a single blow. When he arrives at the giant's cave, Usopp distracts the creature with his heroic stories while Nami tries to find a way out. However, they soon discover that Brogy does not intend to devour them. The truth is that the giant feels very lonely and took the humans to keep him company during lunch. That afternoon, Luffy and Vivi meet the giant Dory, another resident of the island, and discover that every day, when the volcano erupts, the 2 giants who live on that island fight till elimination. After more than 73,000 duels, Brogy and Dory continue the tradition created by an ancient conflict, and every day, the battle between them ends in a draw. According to Dory, giants live for 300 years, and for the past 100 years, their only goal has been to defeat their opponent, even though neither of them remembers the conflict that sparked their enmity. When the 2 enemies meet for battle, Luffy and Usopp split up to cheer for their favorite giant, but Nami is not very interested in that duel, as she is not feeling very well. Suddenly, Brogy stops fighting and everything indicates that he has been poisoned. At that moment, Luffy spots 2 Baroque Works agents standing on a rock and runs towards them. Meanwhile, Usopp tries to stop the duel, but Brogy decides to continue even though he knows he is at a disadvantage and ends up being eliminated by Dory's sword. After capturing Nami, Valentine knocks Usopp down, who runs to alert the surviving giant about what is happening. When he finds out that his partner has been poisoned, Dory becomes enraged and leaves upset, so Usopp decides to do something to save Nami. Upon arriving at Brogy's cave, Dory mourns his perishment and vows to find the person who poisoned him. At that moment, Mr. 3 appears and uses the wax he produces to capture the giant. After being captured and taken to a wax hut where her friends are, Vivi realizes that something is wrong with them and soon notices a paint mark on Nami's skin. Immediately, the princess stretches out her leg to erase that circle, and Nami immediately returns to normal. Soon after, the trio is taken outside and their feet are glued to a cake made of wax. Mr. 3's goal is to turn them into statues so that they will suffer a slow and painful perishment. At that moment, Nami manages to convince the villain to wipe the ink off Zoro's leg, and the swordsman tries to use his swords to free himself. However, he discovers that the wax is as hard as steel, so there is no way to escape. After saving his captain, who was under Miss Goldenweek's control, Usopp runs to the wax monument and Luffy chases Mr. 3 when he discovers that he is the mastermind behind all the evil that has befallen the island.
So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.